Good afternoon. My name is Chris Foreman. I'm the CEO of Marketplace.city. Monitoring our panel today at 1 o'clock. Thank you all for joining. We have an excellent group of panelists today, and I'm going to invite them up onto stage with me, and then we'll get started with some introductions. So without further ado, I'll invite my panelists. Kim LaGrue, the Chief Information Officer of the City of New Orleans. Jason Sankey, the Chief Information Officer of the City of Atlanta. Margaret, Brisbane, the Chief Information Officer of Miami-Dade County. Little home court advantage there. Phaedra Ellis-Lamkins, the CEO of Promise. Thank you. And last but not least, Amir, Elichai, the CEO of Carbyne. Let's get a round of applause for all of our panelists. Get started. Please take a seat.
It's right there to your left.
So as we get started, the topic of our panel today is cloud AI, next-gen city services. So what I've found, coming to a lot of smart cities conferences since we founded our company 5 years ago, actually launched it at the Smart City World Congress in Barcelona in 2017, is that there's a lot of discussion about what we could do, what we should do, what we need to do, and not as much about what we're doing. And when we're working with cities around the world, they're often asking us, how are people leveraging not so much cloud anymore, because a lot of people have adopted cloud, but AI, the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, you name it. A lot of different topics. But we are often giving examples of that. And that's what we're hoping to dive into today is more concrete examples of how the cities in the U.S. and around the world are leveraging next-gen technologies. Maybe not the metaverse quite yet, although if we have an example of that, by all means, panelists. But really, just automating traditionally manual, paper-based, or just slow, inefficient processes, and where those opportunities lie within our governments, and then how we're leveraging modern technology to improve those processes, and at the end, the services to our residents. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves with a brief introduction, with 5 panelists, obviously in 40 minutes. We don't have a ton of time for everybody, so we're going to get started with that. So why don't we start with Kim and then move down towards me. Kim?
Hi, I'm Kimberly LaGrue. I'm the CIO of the City of New Orleans. Our team delivers technology services to our city agencies and public safety teams.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Sankey, CIO for the City of Atlanta. And since I was walking up the stairs when I heard the cheers, I'm going to act like they were for me. I've been with the City of Atlanta for 15 months now, and I've been with the public sector in various CIO roles for the past 9 years. Prior to that, I was with Citigroup for 13 years. And fun fact, if I can go back in time and do it all over again, I would have started with the public sector because what you do actually matters and it impacts the lives of others. And there's nothing better than that feeling of accomplishment when you're giving back to the community.
Hello, I am Margaret, Brisbane, and I am the CIO for Miami-Dade County. And the benefit of being local is that you have your own cheering section. So I am responsible for the IT department of 900 plus amazing IT professionals, and we provide IT services for all 25 county departments, and very happy to be here today with all of you guys. And welcome to Miami.
Hello, my name is Phaedra Ellis-Lamkins, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Promise. I travel with my cheering section, apparently, so never let it say that Promise isn't prepared. And we help governments move money between the people who rely on their services. And so we do payment plans and we help get aid out. My fun fact is I used to manage the musician Prince.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, not as exciting as Atlanta, but.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amir. I'm a Carbyne CEO and founder. We are a next-generation 911 solution, basically providing advanced 911 capabilities for governments. shifting people from just calling to 911 to be able to deliver multimedia such as real-time video, real-time imagery, and more information from citizens to 911 to the first responders in real time. Working with and giving services to more than 400 million people worldwide, based in New York City. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you very much. So since we are joined by 3 CIOs and 2 CEOs, the fact that you have the C in the front of your title means that you can do something about it. When you are coming into your, to a new government job or a new role, or maybe you've been in a role for a long time, and you look at a process, you look at a service being delivered to residents within a city, or if you're starting a company that works with cities, and you look at something and say, why is this way? Why does this work this way? Why is this broken? Why doesn't somebody do something about it? Well, that's you in a lot of cases. You can choose to do something about it and start that change. So I'm really curious, either having been in a role or maybe starting a new role recently, where have you seen the sort of opportunities for improvement, and where you can leverage technology, being in sort of technical roles, to actually improve those services? And since we're on a home court with Margaret, would you mind getting us kicked off here?
Absolutely. Inefficiencies is not just in business. It's not just in government. We are all faced with inefficiencies every day. And I think one of the things that's really great is that if we're on this journey of continuous improvement, we will identify those inefficiencies and we will do something about them. I think it's interesting, but the pandemic really elevated some of the inefficiencies in government, and really around how do we serve our residents. They were demanding a different level of service from government during the pandemic than we had, in our processes. And so this was a matter of changing our business processes and meeting our residents where they were. It meant more self-service. It meant that we had to really deliver government services in a completely different way. And the good thing is that we propelled that, I would say, 3 years fast forward. If we had planned some of these changes, I guarantee you we'd still be working on them. But the fact that our residents were demanding to interact with government very differently, we were able to provide access to data that they needed, and data from the county means everything from our GIS data to all our crime stats data. People want to know what we are doing with their dollars. And so just making information available to our residents was something. We revamped our entire open data portal, making so much government information readily available to our residents. But I can just point to one thing in terms of efficiency. And I'll point to something in our social services area, because our director of social services was very familiar with this. We are servicing all these folks at home who need assistance, but we were going with 6 forms. Here are all the sheets of paper we need to review. You need to sign every form. Guess what? We digitized all of that information and had them sign once and uploaded all the forms to the state, instead of them bringing 6 layers of forms back for every resident and manually entering those things. So again, efficiency is something that we recognize in our business processes and we enable with technology on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks. You mentioned something about providing services to residents where they are. And Jason, that was something that's a quote that you actually mentioned ahead of this panel as well. Are you doing something similar in Atlanta?
Yes, we are. So it's important that when we think about technology, we're not thinking about technology from our perspective, but we're thinking about technology from those who actually consume technology for the city of Atlanta. And an example, I started back in June of 2001, and we were looking at some of the accomplishments that we made throughout the year, throughout the fiscal year. And one accomplishment was around our 311 call center. And so I had it as an accomplishment, And I'm at city council, and I met with the mayor, and I was talking about this accomplishment, and they said, well, why are we getting all of these citizen complaints about 311 in this new system? So we took a deep dive, and it was because we delivered the 311 solution based on what we thought they needed. So we're really leaning into user-centered design and development, and what we're starting to put together is really a mobile lab, so a mobile innovation lab. So we're meeting the community, we're meeting the leaders, the businesses, the visitors, and we're going to show them the technology that we have, and we're going to meet them there as opposed to having them coming down to City Hall to get real-time feedback to say, are we moving in the right direction? Are we providing the solutions that they're looking for?
Kim, I think when we spoke also prior to the panel, you had mentioned just the importance of not only acknowledging what data you have, but using that data and combining it with other data sets, and especially in the city of New Orleans, where you're consistently, almost constantly responding to some kind of a crisis scenario, disaster of some sort, right? And you have to really take into consideration a lot of your most vulnerable residents. And so I think you had some examples not only of how you've upgraded your technology to be more responsive and to improve your continuity, but also to be more responsive to those vulnerable residents.
Yes, we had to. Crisis management is what we do all the time. Whether it was, we had a building collapse, and a month and a half later, a cyber attack. 3 months later, the pandemic. What we learned through those things is our residents constantly needed information, and it was our responsibility to deliver that. So whether it was slow communication or no communication when our systems were offline, we had to build back understanding that giving information and dispensing information to our citizens in a way that they could consume it was our responsibility, and it was really important. So we had to build our systems to be more resilient, whether that was cybersecurity and making sure that our remote access to things like permitting. We were offline in December, right before tax season and right before Mardi Gras. So we had to make sure that what we brought back would be constantly available. We learned a lot about how the citizens interacted with government during that period, and that meant our responsibility was to make sure that we restored those systems, not just the way that they used them, we made them more efficient, and then we had to make them more reliable. And sure enough, just as we got that work done, the 2021 hurricane season brought Hurricane Ida and introduced to us a couple of things that we had not considered, and that was sustained power outages and our residents not having access to the things that we had built and built for them. So we had to go back again and look at ways to sustain them through those kinds of incidents, and it meant making different types of investments in our infrastructure. It wasn't that the infrastructure wasn't secure, and it wasn't that it wasn't fast, but could it survive the type of interruptions that we were experiencing? And at that point, it meant that our infrastructure model needed to change. And that was no fault of our own, and it was no fault of the citizens, but it just meant that delivering services to government we have to be nimble, we have to be agile in our thinking, and we have to think about how we're going to constantly dispense that information regardless of the situation.
For our two CEOs, you all obviously working with a lot of local governments around the world. You're walking into a different situation all the time. We often say that cities are unique, but city problems are not. They are often addressing similar problems, but in much different ways. So when you're walking into a new customer, can you share an example of what that current process looked like and how you saw an opportunity to improve that?
Sure, and actually I will use the example of New Orleans. Sure. Luckily, we are working with the 3 agencies here in different stages, but when the pandemic started, New Orleans have an amazing 911 director. His name is Tyrell Morris. He gave us a call to Carbyne and said, our citizens are now calling us for weird things like that 911 was not facing before. They're asking us about symptoms, about whether I should go to the hospital because I feel not good. And there is like a big mass, and you saw a 911 call surge. And basically, we need to have a new capabilities to face with those new questions and needs coming into the 911 center. Thanks to the fact that we are full cloud-based solution, and as you know, when the pandemic started, no one could travel. You cannot come into the cities and visit the cities, and the legacy providers could not provide the needed solutions. We provided the city of New Orleans of one of our cloud-based capabilities and deployed 3 hours after first call a system called Universe to help to be able to deliver real-time video and kind of early care diagnostic about what people are reporting about. And with that, basically, they had an ability to share this information with nurses or doctors, depending on the severity of the event, and basically save tremendously the amount of people that are basically attending to hospital and then getting COVID there. And this was a huge example and a great example of the use of technology to support the need of a great city like New Orleans. And 2.5 months ago, you mentioned the hurricane seasons, etc. The city of New Orleans was the first in the United States to adopt Carbyne full cloud-based 911 solution. I don't know if you know, but in Ida, as an example, the city of New Orleans was disconnected from 911 for 6 days. Thanks to Carbyne solution now, the city of New Orleans can take 911 calls from Atlanta, from anywhere. Okay, there's no need anymore to be bound to a physical location, thanks to the power of the cloud and the infrastructure that is now available to all of us in our hands, now also in the 911. So this is like small examples of how technology is serving these governments.
I just hope if somebody calls 911 Atlanta, it's going to Atlanta dispatch and not North.
Yeah.
Phaedra.
I appreciate the theme about COVID creating a lot of innovation for local governments. We saw that we handle payments for government. And a couple of things happened that created crisis. One is because it was a public health crisis, a lot of people stopped shutting off water, and people were also in a financial crisis. So in our clients like Louisville, Kentucky, 40% of people were behind on their water bill. And for a second, jurisdictions like, what are we going to do with the fact that there's so much debt now associated and we're not doing shutoffs? And so what we do as a company is we do installment plans or payment plans with 0 interest. And 93% of people pay us back. And the way we think about it is because if you need help making payments anywhere else, if you want to buy a Peloton, they're like 0 interest, 3 questions, you get it. If you want a payment plan, bring in your taxes, come in the office, fill out a form, prove to us you want to pay us. And that just seems broken in this day and age when innovation around payments is happening. And so what we were able to do, and the reason it's so problematic is most payment software isn't built for poor people. And so it doesn't have things like installment plans and payment plans. It doesn't send reminders. It doesn't let you change the date a payment is due. And so Promise did all those things. And our business grew very rapidly because we were able to help bring money in. So we do installment plans, and what we learned is governments weren't built for that crisis moment of what happens when revenue stops coming in and what happens when people can no longer come into the office and turn in a form. The second thing we learned is that all of a sudden, it wasn't just that we needed to bring money in, it was that we had to push money out because all of a sudden there was federal resources coming in. And I appreciated the example that we heard from Miami. And we saw that because a lot of what used to happen in aid is you used to go to a nonprofit. The nonprofit would have you fill out a form, and then you would have to wait to get aid until that nonprofit got the money. You had to bring in a copy of your taxes. It's very antiquated. Like you could literally get a house with almost as much information as getting $250 reduction off your water bill. And so what we discovered is there was a way that we could use the technology of having the payment information plus knowing who's eligible, and we could ask people 3 questions and give them aid. And a great model is in place like in Kentucky where we did it this way and the electric company did it in a traditional way through community action agencies. We got $1 million out within 24 hours. They got $300,000 out in 5 months. And so we went through all of our money very quickly. We just signed the state of Virginia on Monday to do some of that same work. And so to us, it's really about recognizing that we want to use some of the things that work for the private sector for the public sector. We want payments to be easy. We want forms to be simple. We think the integration, and I think the benefit of the cloud is it shouldn't just be about efficiency. It's really about how do we use technology advancement. And I think a lot of times, now people are moving towards driver's licenses that are digital. So we should be thinking about how are we doing wallet-based aid. And so that's the stuff that we think about. That's the real opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's oftentimes these solutions that seem just so obvious in outside of the sort of government sphere that become so challenging to do inside of the public sector. Or oftentimes it is the modern technology, like the cloud, for instance, for financial information for residents, is now going to go up in the cloud. How do we manage that? It's going to kill the project. 911 data, it's going to go in the cloud. What happens if it gets routed to Atlanta? That stuff doesn't happen, but just because it goes into this shared environment and we can't see and touch it, that we're going to kill the project because this kind of fear of the unknown and fear of the new modern technology. So I think how do governments not only address those fears and put them aside, but then prioritize which citizen services are we going to actually dedicate our time and resources to get it over the finish line? Because it's not easy to bring in new technology and to convince everyone that this is what we need to do and to take a step forward. How do you kind of build up the credibility for the technology? How do you get people on your side, get a cheering squad, whatever it is, to actually get these projects done?
In New Orleans, one of the other things that we did was we combined our financial systems. So we had antiquated disparate financial systems that needed to be consolidated. And I don't think there's a right answer between cloud, premise-based, and AI-based systems. And one model does not fit every business case or every situation. Moving our financials to the cloud meant several things, but there was a big concern that our residents would not respond to a new, more technically based financial system. And what we learned was that was the best move for the city. It was the best way for us to protect our financial data and to actually get payments to our residents, to our vendors more quickly. But it meant that we had to do a good bit of socializing the changes that we were making. We had to do a good bit of advocating for what it would mean for vendors, suppliers, and outreach was tremendous in that type of effort. What helped us was the fact that they could then see the benefits of that system. And it really didn't matter whether it was a AI-based system. It didn't matter that whether we kept it in our data center or we moved it to a cloud-based system. What we had to make was the interface with our residents and with our businesses more effective. And that's where we really had to do the work. So the back end really just didn't matter to them, but we had to listen to them and we had to go through those forums and let our vendors and our residents tell us how this system could be more effective. And that was eventually successful for us.
So keep an eye on what the goal is and not getting lost in the weeds.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other examples there?
I think the public sector is interesting because we all want to see government succeed. There's no one that says, well, we want a city to fail. We want a county to fail. We want a state to fail. We all want success in the public sector. So I think building ecosystems where we're partnering with Miami-Dade, we're partnering with the city of New Orleans from a public sector perspective, but then we're also partnering with our vendors, right, in these public-private partnerships because we know we can't do it on our own. But if we spend the time to partner with our colleagues as well as with our vendor partners and create this ecosystem of success, I think that's where we get the sustainability and really the drive and momentum to keep things going, because COVID was an interesting situation, right, where technology came to the forefront and we were willing to do whatever it takes to address the situation and get people mobile. But that's hopefully once in a lifetime event. But the sustainability comes through the ecosystem. So me being a vested partner in making sure that Miami-Dade is successful, making sure that New Orleans is successful, but also leveraging our partners.
And when you think of Miami-Dade County and priorities, I can tell you having 24 different departments with 24 different sets of priorities, you know, everything we're trying to do to keep, and they're all different businesses. So solutions that work for the port will not work for animal services, will not work for the social services department. So we are really on many tracks in terms of priorities. But the good thing is that our priorities are all driven by the mayor's priorities. And she will tell you everything is tied to the 4 E's. It's equity, economy, environment, and engagement. And so as we look at technology priorities, the question is being asked, is this solving the needs of our citizens? Is this allowing the county to interact and deliver services much better than we are today? And so a lot of what we're doing really is tied to that. ERP, we absolutely just implemented an ERP system. And I can tell you, it was a heavy lift. It was a heavy lift, but this served the entire county. And now with a fully integrated system for supply chain, finance, HR, we had to get out of our legacy system. Number one, that system is unsupported. Number two, our staff is retiring, and the functionality just was not there. And so when we look at technology innovation, it is across the entire county, and it's not single-threaded, but it always is driven by a purpose, and that's kind of the way we operate within Miami-Dade County.
Yeah. I'm curious for Phaedra and for Amir, when you're going into talk with a new local government, municipality, what have you, how do you see what you do fitting into their role of priorities and sort of make it important for them, and so that it can be prioritized and your services are being leveraged?
Well, one thing we did is we recognized that for cities, it's difficult to do these things one by one. And so we partnered with CEOs like Davida, who runs Aclima that I see there, and Block Power, and we partnered with Bitwise and started something called the Upside Tech Alliance. And we see our woman who runs it, Michelle DePass. And the reason we did that is because we recognize that cities need holistic solutions. It's very difficult, like we realize, just to solve for payments, just to solve for this one issue. And so to the same way, I think that we wanted to be able to solve for efficiency and equity in one place and be able to make sure that cities could buy something all together. And so for us, that's been important. I also just want to give a commercial for everyone who doesn't understand what the difference between cloud, place-based, and some of these things. I don't know if that's you, but we should probably, I saw some people looking a little dazed as we talk about some of these things. And cloud-based, as simple as possible, being data that is literally not somewhere physically, but is in the cloud. And I think that's the simplest way I can describe it. Someone might describe it more beautifully than that. And so I just wanted to say that. But I think that the way of the future will be being able to solve for problems holistically. Because I think to the CIO's points, it isn't just individual problems anymore. It's understanding a climate bill just passed. That climate bill has payments in it. That climate bill has requirements about how to measure pollution. And so the solutions will have to be comprehensive also.
Yeah, I can say that in our industry, basically the biggest push was because of the fact that COVID came in and basically government faced with new things that they never faced with before. And then funding became available from the infrastructure bill, and basically now the federal government is pushing government to make a transition into IP, basically moving from a legacy communication to an IP to the internet communication. What we are doing at Carbyne basically is that every time that we are coming into a new agency, we are asking about their objective and what they are trying to solve. As an example, time to dispatch, if it's taking you like 2 minutes, what you want to achieve with Carbyne, then we are helping them to measure the improvements and to really to prove them that what they implemented is really bringing the benefit that they were looking for. As you're doing it in any enterprise, I think that government needs to work according to those guidelines as well in order to make sure that the technology that you have implemented really bring the benefits that you're looking for. So this is something that we are doing.
I think it's great to sort of begin and end that those responses kind of focused on the goal. So it's not just focused on the technology, it's what goal are we trying to achieve, and can technology help us get there faster than any other manual process. You also mentioned kind of the funding, government funding. I know in your world that the federal government actually was providing grants through Homeland Security to upgrade 911. We work with one of our clients in the city of Aurora, Illinois, who leveraged a Homeland Security grant to improve their next-gen 911 prior to all this additional federal funding. And it was amazing. It was transformational to be able to leverage this assistance to change and improve a service to their residents. And I think that with this funding that's arriving at different points, with all the the new bills and laws that are being passed, starting with CARES to Rescue Plan, IAJA, and now more coming down the road. You have now this opportunity to take some big bets, to invest in changing your technology landscape or really improving your services, your goals to your residents. How has this funding impacted the cities in your priorities, if at all?
Well, I'll talk briefly about the source of fundings are different. As the mayor mentioned this morning, some of the funds are made readily available to Miami-Dade, to the counties, to the cities, and some are funneled through the state. The CARES dollars, Miami-Dade was a steward of, I would say, $457 million, and those went out the door to our residents, whether to pay their rent, to our taxi drivers, to our arts. We really made sure that programs were set up to really impact our residents and the lives that were affected by the pandemic. The ARPA dollars or infrastructure is really leaning into that. Our port or airport, they're all getting significant funding from these dollars to improve the entire infrastructure in that area. Our transit department, or environmental team, we have an entire infrastructure group that meets on a regular basis to talk about the source of these fundings and how it's being spent in the county. When you think of the state dollars, the dollars that are controlled differently than the ones that we can really access directly, broadband comes to mind, and this is one of those areas that is really key to the mayor and to the livelihood of our residents. Think of folks who have no access. That means they're lacking the opportunity for learning, for jobs, for health care, for financial. And so one of the things that we convened a few weeks ago was a local technology planning committee. And that was essential for providers to get funding from the state. If you were not a part of that team, you couldn't access those dollars. So we also have to learn the rules around these, the funding that's available to ensure that everyone understands how they can get access to the dollars. So again, broadband, a key initiative. Anna spoke about that earlier in terms of what the county is doing. And our job was really convene this committee to give these folks access to the federal dollars, the state dollars.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're leveraging this opportunity to create these new sort of networks and bringing people in. If you want to have a seat at the table when the funding comes down, you better sit at the table now as part of this committee.
Absolutely.
Any other examples of kind of the impact of the new kind of federal dollars on new projects?
I think, you know, this is, again, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This amount of investment that's coming from the federal government, I haven't seen before in my lifetime. So this could be a true transition point. You know, when I think about technology, especially here in the United States, I think about how we have built technology for decades. That means we're upgrading servers and we're on old technology and we have legacy systems and we're decommissioning those systems and we're moving to more cloud-based solutions. And then you look at other countries and the cities in those countries who didn't have those legacy platforms. They started in a smarter space than we are. So my goal is going to be to try to focus on how do we put the legacy technology behind us once and for all, and leverage this funding to do so, because I'm tired of talking about end-of-life hardware. I'm tired of talking about decommissioning the old servers. I'm tired of getting reports where we're looking at where we are versus where we want to be. So we're looking at a couple things. One, decommissioning everything we need to decommission and move to the cloud where we can. But two, understanding the art of the possible through, as an example, a digital twin for the City of Atlanta 2.0, so then we can help our departments understand where we can truly take technology. Because right now, they're still caught up in, I do things this way, and I don't want to think about RPA. I want to think about how do I manually get my process done, and that's not where we need to be. So if we're able to leverage these newer technologies like that digital twin, just so they can see the art of the possible, I think this funding can help springboard some really cool things in city government.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate the perspective of the CIOs on this panel, because I think what we see as entrepreneurs in the private sector is when you meet innovation with an ability to execute and a commitment to being able to execute, all things are possible. And there's so much capital available right now that we would be remiss to not figure out how to provide the highest quality of service to residents, to people who deserve it the most. And I think technology is really about, right, it's about making something easier to use that you do all the time. And so being able to figure out how to have world-class services for poor people and seniors and people who rely on it, I think that's the beauty of this. And being able to think about how do you use the private sector, that's what we're committed to at Promise. And I just really appreciate, because I think it isn't just CARES, it isn't just ARPA, it isn't just the infrastructure, now we have the climate bill. This is the greatest investment, I think, of our lifetime. And to leverage it to be able to use software for good is something I think that's going to be incredibly important.
I agree. There was an example that came up. Now, obviously, we're using modern next-gen terms like artificial intelligence, but there's an example that came up on one of our pre-calls about how Miami-Dade County is leveraging facial recognition to support some of its most vulnerable residents, its most sensitive residents. So I was wondering, Margaret, if you mind expanding on that example a little bit for us.
Yeah, I think just a moment of chuckle here. When we discuss facial recognition, the two examples I mentioned was that there was a pilot at our airport where at one of the terminals they are using facial recognition. But I also mentioned a tool that's used on our four-legged friends. It's facial recognition for dogs, and it's called Finding Rover. And so if you are able to upload a picture of your favorite pet and it gets lost and someone finds it and can take a picture and upload it, then there's a match and then there's a recovery of your animal. So, not only, and it's kind of funny because that technology only works on dogs and not cats, because the facial features of dogs are so very different than the ones of cats. And so, facial recognition is surely in a different realm today.
And we've had to take it. I think the pandemic taught us to be pragmatic, and even more pragmatic. Not that facial recognition for dogs isn't important, but when they're...
He just needed a moment of chuckle.
Okay.
What can I say?
Okay, cool.
I think that's where facial recognition belongs.
It's an excellent use of it. Put it in a box, and we'll move on.
Well, when we didn't have money and when our budgets were really cut, technology was reduced to the things that were essential and important. And the money that we spent was to keep lights on, to make sure services were delivered at a very basic level. And it kind of level set us, and it reset our thinking about how we were going to implement new technologies. And it made us think, what problem could I solve right now? Even with money, could I really solve the problem? So looking at ARPA and IJA and those infrastructure funds and what we could do with them, if I threw $1 million at a problem, is that really going to solve it? To your point, broadband, digital equity, can we really just give someone free internet access and solve their problems? Is that going to help them train, get a job, apply for that job, know how to use the internet? So wraparound services also became important, and sometimes the prioritizing our spend right now is about those other services that we have to deliver to citizens, whether it's digital equity training, whether it's device access. So we're looking at ways to spend money that just don't look cool and sexy, but made us really think about how we're going to put those monies to the best use, especially in the long term.
Mm-hmm. I think as we kind of wrap up our panel here, I think, Kim, that's a great way to sort of start some closing comments just on how to actually get started. Recommendations for other folks in your role, in a CIO role or a mayor's role or deputy mayor, deputy city manager role. What's those first steps that you take? And we'll come down the line. Jason?
I think it starts with a vision. So we focus on our mayor's vision. It goes to our mission. Then we build our strategy. Then we actually have to develop what are our key performance indicators to make sure that we're executing our strategy. But most importantly, I think anytime you think of government, we move slow. And there's a number of reasons why we move slow, procurement being a main one. If there are any procurement officers in here, we can talk later. But accelerate comes to mind because time waits for no one. And I know I'm not the only one sitting here today saying, wow, it's mid-September already. What happened to 2022? So focus on acceleration, but it starts with a vision and keeping accountable to your strategy and your goals and objectives.
And for us, the important thing is alignment. Alignment to the mayor's vision, alignment to the needs of our departments and our residents. With 24 different departments within the county, as a CIO, it is critical that we are partners with those departments because we're enabling their ability to deliver services with technology. Technology is not the driver, it's the enabler. And our partners, it is absolutely important that we don't call folks who we do business with vendors. If you're a vendor, you're a dime a dozen. If you're a partner, you understand the mission of the county, that it's not just internal, but it's external. What are we doing for our community? How are we reaching into those underserved areas to do training programs, to partner? And so, again, alignment and collaboration. Collaborating across all our 36 municipal government. The mayor mentioned today data sharing. This is what we are aiming for, making sure that, the lines are not, it's not a line from Miami to Coral Gables to Hialeah. It is seamless. We are one Miami-Dade County, and we're delivering services to our residents collectively as government agencies.
Yeah, I really agree with everything on the panel that's been said. I want to put a couple of things from the private sector that makes it so different. One is the ability to leverage procurement. I want to give a huge example. We met with the mayor of Newark, and we went live as a company within 21 days of our first meeting, which is like unheard of. And I just want to give him a credit because he believed he didn't want people to have their water shut off. And that type of leadership of we are starting, this is happening, I think is incredible. I think alignment among departments is when we see things move the most quickly, when everyone is like, we are doing this. I think also measuring success is really important. We sometimes see the expectation is not set as high, but I think the private sector should be expected to be able to produce higher quality, lower cost. I also would make the case for new companies and companies of color. I think sometimes it feels safe to work with Microsoft or larger companies, and I think the companies who are committed, who want to be able to serve those residents, I think are critical for the growth of cities and the visions that you hear laid out.
First of all, it's great to hear all these comments today. I think one thing that we're adopting in every startup company, it's something called fail fast. And I think there is a dissonance between the technology that is running very, very fast than governments that are trying to adopt to new technologies, and just putting a standard or protocol will take 1 year, and then until you implement this standard, you already missed. There is new technologies coming in. So fail fast means that every city needs to have an option to testing quick and to see if it's returned the investment. Okay, of course, it should not be on the real production environment, but have to have kind of an innovation lab to be able to test things as we're doing in startups, and then quickly make a decision whether I see those KPIs coming through and it's returned the investment that I thought that it will, or it's a failed and let's check something else. So I think failed fast is something that government should adopt in that way or a different way. And that.
Thank you. In conclusion, I think Phaedra made a great comment about our mayors and supporting our mayors because we need their support. Margaret's mayor was here today, Mayor of Miami-Dade County. So I'm sure there's a question that's on everybody's mind after hearing from the mayor this morning, which is, Margaret, what did you get the mayor for her birthday?
Well, we had an 8 a.m. meeting and 65 of us sang happy birthday. It was not cute. We are all not singers, but I tell you, she enjoyed it, and that's what's important. She
Good.
knows that we all care very much for her.
Excellent. Well, thank you to my panelists for attending today. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, everybody.